So, Carol Lee, it felt like the Cold War returned this week to Washington. The president's not going to go see Vladimir Putin because he's not being a nice guy. I think we've been here before, but not for a long time.
No, not for a very long time. It was a huge snub, which is exactly what the White House intended for it to be. And essentially, they decided that they weren't making any progress on any of these issues, and from Syria to missile defense and other topics. And so once Russia gave asylum to Edward Snowden, the White House said forget it, and so they've backed out of this meeting, and now things are really chilly between the two leaders.
What I thought was really striking was how both sides were more than happy to say this isn't just about Snowden, this is about how bad our relations are across the board. It's like they both wanted to wallow in it for a while, which surprised me a little bit.
Well, it's also to the White House's advantage, though, on the Snowden matter, because the bigger deal they make of him, the bigger he becomes.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in all of these polls, he's actually a sympathic figure, not just globally, but even in the U.S. And so I don't know that it's to the White House's advantage to make him 10 feet tall.
Yeah, that's true. And although I do think if the Snowden visa problem hadn't happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
We wouldn't.
They would have swallowed all the rest of this
Right.
and gone off to Moscow and had their meeting
Right.
with a nasty Russian leader anyway.
I mean, can you imagine like Obama going to Moscow while Snowden is there and going through all the trappings of sitting down with Putin, who he doesn't want to sit down with anyways?
While the White House press corps scurries around
right,
trying
and
to
who knows,
find
hunting
Edward
for Snowden, right? And
Where's
Snowden's
Waldo?
waving at the motorcade, or I mean, it's just there's no conceivable way that they would do that. And the White House felt like, that this wasn't a missed opportunity for Obama to sit down and go face to face with Putin, that rather it was more important for them to make sure that it didn't look like the United States was being weak in some way.
But don't you think these two guys, they don't like each other, right? I mean,
No,
Barack
no.
Obama and Vladimir Putin, I mean, they're not very good at even hiding it.
No, and if you remember a year ago at the G8 when Obama moved that to Camp David, Putin decided he wasn't going to show because he had to deal with his government, which everyone took for code as just being a snub. And then they did meet the following month, and I was the pool reporter for that meeting. It was the first time they ever met, and the body language, everyone was interested in that, and there was zero chemistry between the two of them. And even at the end, when they both said what they had to say, Putin sat there like this, and Obama sort of looked the other direction. And at the end, usually after the cameras have turned off, the leaders will stand up and they'll exchange something. And they both just went in completely different directions. And we've seen in this last meeting that he had with him in June that nothing's gotten any warmer.
So President Obama and Bibi Netanyahu of Israel have figured out how to improve the body language, but these two guys,
they got to work on it.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a Syrian issue that ought to be discussed between these two guys. It's now not going to be discussed, right? I mean, there should be some understanding between the U.S. and Russia that President Assad's going to go. The only way that the Russians step back and let that happen is if they get some assurances they're not going to get shut out of the game in post-Assad Syria. Now, that is a conversation that should happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the areas where the White House probably needs Russia the most right now is on Syria, and it is becoming a graver and graver problem really every day. So it is at least a policy loss probably for both sides, and probably certainly for Syria, in terms of having an opportunity to try to hash through some of these things. However, as Carol pointed out, it doesn't seem like at least the White House felt that it had sufficiently created a position or put the president in a position where they could have something to deliver at that meeting. And so, it maybe it just means that they're buying time because they weren't going to be able to make something happen in
Because
September.
they don't know what the
anyway.
deal is
Right.
yet.
Right, and when I spoke with some senior administration official yesterday, he was saying that they felt like sometimes you have to put another country on notice in order to get what you want in a policy realm, and that there was no deliverable to be had on Syria. And so rather than sit down and go through the motions of talking about it, they feel like having this little rift, it may actually get them further down the road. And whether or not that's true,
But you have to wonder, is this the extent of the U.S.'s leverage? I mean, it's almost like, and this is oversimplifying, but someone hurt your feelings at school, so you're not going to go to their birthday party. I mean, there comes a point when these are serious issues they have to be talking through, Snowden aside, with Syria, and is this, what kind of a message does this send?
Well, that's why if Snowden hadn't happened, that would have been the rationale. Okay, the relationship is in terrible shape, but we do have these important things we have to talk about. That would have been exactly where we would be if not for the Snowden matter, I think, anyway.
Well, and the other important thing to remember is that they haven't cut off all communications.
Yeah.
You're having this week, the secretaries of state and defense and their Russian counterparts are going to sit down.
Which they could have canceled and decided
and
not
they
to.
considered canceling.